Hello, everyone. We are getting started on topic 14, short song lyric, xiaoling. It is my pleasure to introduce our guest host, Dr. Maya Sameh. Today, she is presenting her first episode entitled, I Have Known How to Love Another, a pair of anonymous poems in dialogue. Let us warmly welcome Dr. Sameh.
This is the first of 3 episodes about short song lyric poems, or xiaoling. Before we get into talking about the genre, the song lyric, I'd like to start by telling the story of how we came to possess the pair of anonymous poems that we will be discussing in this episode. In 1900, a Chinese Taoist monk named Wang Yuanlu was overseeing a complex of caves and Buddhist grottos in Dunhuang in Gansu province of Western China. These caves had been carved into a mile-long stretch along a river, beginning in the 4th century of the Common Era. On this day in 1900, Wang Yuanlu discovered a hidden chamber behind a wall painting. In it, he found a trove of some 50,000 documents, paintings, and artifacts. It's now thought that this chamber had been sealed up in the 11th century and left basically untouched until he found it right at the start of the 20th century. After attempting to alert the Qing government to his find, the monk eventually sold the manuscripts and paintings to explorers like Hungarian-born British archaeologist Mark Aurel Stein in 1907 and French archaeologist Paul Pelliot soon after. The manuscripts are now held in collections all over the world, where they provide a great resource for studying the interactions of culture and religion along the Silk Road over the centuries. Among these manuscripts were numerous poems and poem fragments, including a large number of poems in a new genre called the song lyric, or ci in Chinese, that had arisen in the late Tang Dynasty. Many of these poems and fragments were anonymous. The examples I want to look at in this episode are a pair of anonymous poems that form an interesting dialogue with each other. The poems are written to the tune Nangezi, or Southern Song. Listen now to the first of the 2 poems.
To the tune, Southern Tune, Number 1. Standing, leaning at the beaded curtain, with whom have you been sharing your heart? The new scratches on your face are plain as day. Who tied the love knot in your silk sash? And who's torn the hem of your skirt? Why are your cicada locks in disarray? And your hairpin, why is it broken? For whom these tear streaks in your rouge? Tell me straight here before the hall. Don't hem and haw.
The first thing we notice about this poem is probably its colloquial quality. There are 6 questions and 10 lines. In the Chinese, the question words shay, who, shen, what, and he, also meaning what, are each repeated twice. The speaker seems to be a man addressing a woman who is standing, leaning at the beaded curtain in the doorway. Immediately, the accusations begin to mount as he enumerates the evidence against her, from the scratches on her face and torn clothing that he reads as evidence of infidelity, to the love knot or heart knot in her sash that usually would have been tied by a lover. The hairpin, which he observes to be broken, may have been his own love token, which now he sees seemingly in a state of neglect. The interrogation follows the male speaker's gaze as it takes in the elements of the woman's appearance. Some of these elements are associated with the convention in Chinese poetry of the abandoned woman's complaint. For centuries, many male poets in China had adopted the voice of a woman alone, longing for her husband, and used this conventional persona to varied poetic effect. In the Six Dynasties period that preceded the Tang, poets who adopted the convention had milked its erotic potential, finding the picture of the woman alone to be an inviting one. Here, the man's litany of accusations follows his gaze to take in these eroticized elements, from her inviting posture in a doorway to her body, starting from her face and moving to her display of a love token at her waist, to the torn hem, and then back up to her mussed hair and tear-streaked face. The interrogation draws attention to the male speaker's power to exact an account from her, but at the same time, ironically, it piles up proofs of his own neglect. In the next poem in the set, listen as a female speaker turns the list of his accusations into a catalog of evidence of her own devotion. To the tune, Southern Tune number 2. Since you went away, I've no heart to love another. New scratches on my face appeared in my dreams. I tied the love knot in my own silk sash. It was the child who stepped on my hem. The beaded curtain mussed my cicada locks. The hairpin broke along an old crack. These streaks in my makeup are from crying for you. I'm like the cypresses on South Mountain. I've no heart to love another. Right off the bat, the woman draws attention to the fact that it was the man who had left her. Since you went away, I've no heart to love another. Her straight answers to each of his questions enumerate evidence of his neglect and of her faithfulness. I tied the love knot in my own silk sash since you weren't here to tie it. The beaded curtain mussed my hair because I've been standing here watching for you. The hairpin broke along an old crack, presumably from much loving use. And finally, these streaks in my makeup are from crying for you. In this line, when she says from crying for you, the female speaker uses the second person form of address, langjun, used by a woman for her husband or lover. When she compares herself to the unchanging evergreen cypresses in the next line, she uses the humble first-person feminine pronoun qi, which literally means a concubine. Together, these put the woman's defense in the context of a faithful, loving relationship. You are my lover, I am your concubine. The poem ends by reiterating the statement from the beginning of the poem, I've no heart to love another. By taking the same elements of her description from the first poem and making them into evidences of her faithfulness in the second, the female speaker of this poem is also connecting with conventional depictions of female abandonment. This time, though, she's connecting more with the way this convention has appeared in the folk tradition. There, in place of depictions of the beauty and inviting position of the abandoned woman, female constancy was typically contrasted with male neglect and changeability. To give you one small example, there is a short 4-line poem in the folk tradition known as a ziye song that reads as follows. Me, I am the North Star, not a shift in 1,000 years. My love's heart moves with the day star, at dawn in the east, by dusk gone west. This poem draws on an astronomical metaphor to make its point. Just as the man's physical location might be shifting and changing as he's traveling away from home, the man's heart is also inconstant, moving from the east to the west like a planet or the sun. Meanwhile, the woman, remaining steadfastly in her place at home, remains true in her heart as well, steadfast and unmoving as the North Star. In her colloquial, direct proclamation of her faithfulness, the speaker in our second poem calls on the audience's familiarity with this aspect of the folk tradition, and this lends credibility to her defense, though it is perhaps still hard not to wonder who's telling the truth here. These two song lyrics are early anonymous and popular examples of the song lyric genre. It's easy to imagine them being performed before an audience of, say, traveling merchants along the Silk Road. But the genre was already taking root in more elite circles. First, though, let me say a little more about the song lyric as a genre. First of all, why are these poems called song lyrics? Because they were literally lyrics written for songs. In Tang Dynasty China, roughly the 7th to 9th centuries, music from Central Asia was taking Chinese world by storm. This new music, called yan yue, or banquet music, was sung by female entertainers, from court entertainers to high-class courtesans to lower-class singing girls. As I discussed in an earlier episode, Chinese poets in their gatherings enjoyed the performances of high-class courtesan entertainers and joined them in composing lyrics to the new songs. Thus was born the new genre of the song lyric, or ci. Song lyrics are titled by the tune to which they're set. The pair of poems just discussed are titled to the tune Nangezi, or Southern Song. Kind of like if someone wrote a poem to fit the tune of Elvis Presley's Love Me Tender and then called it to the tune Love Me Tender. And then imagine that numerous other poets did the same, all producing poems titled to the tune Love Me Tender, which may have started out inspired by the content of the original song, but over time lost any connection with that subject matter. If you write a poem to fit an existing song, you have to fit the words or the lyrics to the notes in some way. In Chinese, these song lyrics are different from the mainstream of previous poetry, especially the shi, or lyric poem, in a number of ways. The most obvious is their form. Where the shi had a fixed number of characters per line, song lyrics have lines of longer and shorter lengths. In fact, the ci is also referred to as chang duan ju, which means long and short lines. Presumably, this is because the new songs they were written to had lines with a greater or fewer number of notes. The tune patterns, or cipai, that were developed and published specified the number of lines, line lengths, and stanzas, and also incorporated requirements for the placement of rhymes and the required tones for the characters in the lines. Unfortunately, the original tunes of these songs have been lost, so we can't find out exactly how these tonal and rhyme requirements had to do with fitting the songs to the tune, or exactly how these elements matched the song's melody, rhythm, or tempo. Perhaps level or rising tones were used if a note was held longer, for example, while the more abrupt-sounding oblique tone was used for shorter notes, but this is only speculation. The practice of writing song lyrics is called tianci, or filling in the words to these patterns or matrices, and this practice continues today. Early examples of song lyrics are almost all in the shorter form known as xiaoling, but later the genre also develops a longer form known as manci. The shorter xiaoling may have as few as 4 lines, and usually have less than 60 characters. In these 3 episodes, I'm speaking only of the shorter xiaoling poems. Probably because of their origin in the entertainment quarters, song lyrics started out having a strong association with feminine themes and female voice. Often the subject, as here in this pair of poems, was a woman alone or abandoned, or a beautiful woman, perhaps an entertainer in her boudoir. What's rare in this example is that we get 2 different perspectives on the same woman and her situation. The result is a dramatic dialogue that foregrounds both the eroticization of female voice and abandonment, and the power of women's voice in the folk tradition to challenge that narrative. In the next episode, I will discuss 2 early literati examples that remain fairly close to these typical early feminine themes. Then in the 3rd episode, I will move on to a couple of later literati examples that depart farther from those themes while continuing to bear their traces. Thanks for joining me. Until next time.
I hope you enjoyed the talk. Let's relax and listen to a reading of the poems in Mandarin.
南歌子其一，斜影珠帘丽，情事共谁倾？分明面上只痕心，罗带同心谁挽？圣人踏破裙，蝉鬓因何乱？金钗未甚分，红妆垂泪亦何君？分明殿前实说，莫成吟。
南歌子其二，自从君去后，无心爱别人，梦中面上只狠心，罗带同心自挽。被蛮儿踏破裙，蝉鬓珠帘乱，金钗旧骨分。红妆垂泪哭郎君，妾是南山松柏，无心爱别人。
子夜歌，农作北辰星，千年无转移。欢行白日新，朝东暮还西。